So what we'll do for the demo is we'll first start out by looking at the reactive deduplication, which again is going to be focused on, those scenarios where we've piled up duplicates in the past and we want a interface and sort of streamlined process where we can clean them up in mass, but also be able to do that efficiently and effectively inside of Salesforce. Then what we'll look at is the proactive side. So as we create new records, as they come into our CRM, how do we make sure that we're maintaining the cleanliness of our CRM? And then finally, what we'll do is we'll tie those two pieces together of where we can use proactive and reactive deduplication together. So starting out here, I'm going to start with our complete clean product here. And what we'll notice right off the bat is that we support all objects inside of Salesforce. So of course, we have our standard lead, account, and contact. But if there are other use cases around other objects, such as custom objects, those are also use cases we can support as well. So in this example, I'm going to look at our account object. So once I have selected the object, the next thing I then need to do is to come up with a new merge plan. And so typically the approach we will recommend when it comes to creating these merge plans is a phased approach. So starting out in phase one, we'll define what is the strictest possible match we can make between two accounts inside of Salesforce. Then as we go down to phase two, our definition of a match will become looser. Then as we go down each phase, we become looser and looser in terms of what we consider a match. By virtue of becoming looser in our match criteria, that will likely impact how we look at the results. If we make a very strict match, we have a higher level of confidence. We might spend less time going through the results and just auto merging the records together. But if it's a very loose match on, say, something just like domain, we don't have that same level of confidence. So that's where we might spend more time going through the results before we actually merge them together or potentially don't merge them together. So in this example here, I'm going to look at our fuzzy match merge plan, which I've got loaded in this tab here. And so once we've identified our object we're going to be looking at, which is again going to be the account, we've got our name, which is going to be fuzzy match. We then need to determine, well, from that object, which records do I want to run on? Do I want to run on every single account we have inside Salesforce, or do I want to potentially run on a subset of accounts? So there's a few different ways to make that selection. So one, we can build a query through criteria like I've done here. So saying created date equals this year. So starting out, let's clean up all the accounts that have been created within this year before we touch any of the other accounts. Another very common example with the account object is saying something like account type equals prospect. So starting out, let's clean up the prospect accounts before we touch any of the customer accounts. What we can also do is we can also type a free-form query. So I could say something like select ID from account. What that would do is it would grab all the accounts we currently have inside of our CRM. Lastly, what we can do is we can upload a pre-existing CSV file with our Salesforce record IDs, upload and then run based off of that information. So in this example, I'm going to stick with building our query through criteria. And then down here, we just have a few options in terms of how we actually want to match that query data set. So the first one is match only within selected records. So if we say, hey, we only want to look at the accounts created within this year, what we'll do is we'll query for them. And then if we select this first option, we'll just match within those records. If we take our second option, what we'll do is we'll query for all the accounts created within this year, but then we'll match them against the entire database. So once we've got our records then selected, the next thing we then need to determine is, well, how do we actually want to match those records together? And so this is where we're going to have lots of flexibility in defining what actually constitutes a duplicate inside of our environment. So for each company, their definition of a duplicate might vary. So that's why it's important to have that level of customization. And so when it comes to setting up these matching rules, we have two options. So one, we can use our duplicate rules, or two, we can use our custom matching. So with our duplicate rules, with our custom matching, this is where we're looking to pick up on exact matches, but those exact matches don't necessarily live inside the same field. And so an example on an account might be, we might match, say, domain to domain, but we might have an alternative domain field. So we might then match domain to alternative domain. So again, looking to pick up on exact matches, but those matches don't necessarily live inside of the same field. Another common example we come across is like on a contact record, you might have multiple different phone number fields. So we might match phone number to phone number, but also match phone number to mobile phone number. And so we can continue to add these rows of all the different attributes we want to match on. And then down here is where we can then configure the logic to determine what's actually going to constitute a match. And so again, with the custom matching, we are looking for exact matches. So it's not going to pick up on things like John to Jonathan or Salesforce to Salesforce Inc. So that's where we can then leverage our native duplicate rules and then potentially add in some fuzzy logic on something like account name, which will allow us to pick up on some of those matches, such as Salesforce to Salesforce Inc. And so that's what I'm going to be doing in this example. I'm going to be using a fuzzy match on the account name.
Hey, Zach, we just got a question from Andrew here. Does this identify leads that match to contacts, or are we just looking at like objects for this scenario?
Yep. So in the complete clean tool, it's just object to object. So contact to contact, lead to lead. Within our other tool, which is more on the proactive side, we can do lead to contact conversion. So we have an auto conversion step that we can use as part of that process.
Perfect, thanks.
So once we've determined how we're going to match the records together, the final piece before actually previewing the results is to then determine our merge setting. So this is the third major challenge that we identified at the start of the demo here. And that was around wanting to have flexibility in two key areas. So the first one being the winning record selection, and the second one being the field by field data retention. So the first part here, again, is going to be our winning record selection. So maybe if we imagine a scenario where we run this match job and say we identify 5 accounts as being duplicates, they all match together. Well, we then have to determine out of those 5 accounts, which one should be our winner. And so in this case here, I'm saying account type equals customer. But maybe out of those 5 accounts, 3 of them are customer accounts. So then what we can continue to do is we can continue to add rows of criteria to look at different attributes until ideally we have that one standalone winning record. Say we had 10 rows and we still have 2 or more records that are tied, we'll then either default to our oldest or our newest record. The second piece is then going to be our field by field data retention. And I would say probably the most common selection we see for the default field by field data retention is selecting both. And so what that means is if, say, we run this match job and we identify 2 duplicates, and we'll say on the winning record, we have some fields that are blank, but those fields are then populated on the losing record. What we'll do is we'll take those fields from the losing record, push them over to the winning record to make sure we're not unnecessarily losing any valuable data. And then for the custom field by field data retention, this is where we can take it a step further and actually prioritize certain values. So in this example, for the employee value, I'm prioritizing the minimum value. So whichever account has the smallest total of employees, that'll be the value that we carry forward. But what we can also do is we can prioritize certain values. So a very common example on like a contact or lead record is like looking at an opt-out field. So if somebody's opted out of communication and they've checked that box as true, what we'll say is we want to always prioritize that true value. So if that true value exists, it doesn't matter if it's on the winning or the losing record, that is always going to be the value we carried forward. And finally, another common example for the custom field by field data retention is field concatenation. So if there are values that we want to carry forward from multiple records, maybe it's like a pardot comment, and we don't want to lose that valuable information, we can use that field concatenation to take over values from multiple records onto that one single winning record. So once you've got all of that configured, what we would do is we'd go ahead and match these records together, which I've already gone and done in this example here. Once we match them together, what we can do is we can customize the view of the different fields that we want to display within this preview page here. So really bringing in fields are going to help us get to that decision of whether or not we agree with the matches we've made. And then what we can do is we can then go through the results, decide whether or not, 1, we want to actually merge them together, 2, what are going to be the winning records, and then potentially overriding the different fields that we want to retain. So for example, we've selected this first account here as a winner, but maybe I want to take the second account as a winning record. But rather than taking the account name from the second account, I want the account name from that first record. So what we can do is we can make that selection here. So this will still be our winning account, but this will be the account name that we carried for. So that there is a complete clean tool looking at the account object. Again, a couple of things I want to call out is that we support all objects inside of Salesforce. So same principles apply for really any object that we're looking at. And 2, everything we saw here from the actual matching to the merging to the previewing of the results all takes place fully natively inside of your Salesforce environment. So we're not taking the data out to match it, then bringing it back in. It's all taking place inside of your Salesforce environment. So 1, from an efficiency standpoint, and 2, from a security perspective, it tends to be super helpful in those areas.
Awesome. And Zach, we've got a couple questions. I think it'd probably be good to just pause here. So first question we got is, what happens to the child records when we merge records? And
yeah,
I think
great.
Amber's question might be similar, because does this merge related records like activities?
Yep. So both questions tie together. So the default behavior is to bring over all child records. So if we're merging 2 accounts together, all of our contacts, opportunities, related activities, and all of that's going to be brought over to the winning record. So the default behavior is to not lose any valuable data, valuable related child data when we merge them together. With that being said, once we merge them together and we have that one account with all that related data, we then might want to have a cleanup process that's dedicated to some of those child objects where we might now have duplicated them on one single account. So that's where we can then look beyond the account object and clean up some of those other objects.
Perfect. And then one other question from Danielle is, do you have any templates or how would you suggest setting up, I think, these merge plans? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about the CS team and how they can help with that.
Yeah, so every customer we work with gets a dedicated customer success rep who would work with you very closely. So before we even jump right into the product, we would define what are the different attributes that you want to match on and sort of lay out a different plan of those different phases. And we would provide our recommendations on best practices, what we've seen other customers do. But what I would say is, so those plans will typically vary from every customer, just because every customer has different data inside of their environment. But that's something we would work very closely with you on to define.
Great. Those are all the questions for now, so I'll let you get back to it.
Awesome. So the next piece I then want to jump into is the proactive deduplication. So what we've talked about so far is looking at records that already exist inside of our Salesforce environments and being able to, again, go back and clean those up in mass. What we'll now look at is more on the proactive side. So as new accounts get created inside of our CRM, as those new records come in, as an account executive goes and creates an account, how do we make sure that we're not creating duplicates inside of our system? And so as we saw with Complete Clean, when it comes to the proactive deduplication, we support all objects inside of Salesforce. So in this example here, I will look at the account object. It's important to keep in mind that the same principles apply to all other objects. So what we'll do is we'll open up our account-to-account deduplication flow. And what we'll notice here is we have a very similar process as what I defined with the Complete Clean, and that is a sort of that phased approach. So what we'll see within this flow is our little gray icon is going to represent when in this case, an account gets created inside of our Salesforce environment. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through a process of matching that account against our existing data to see if we can identify it as being a duplicate. And so starting out, we are going to define, well, what is the strictest match we can possibly make between two accounts inside of Salesforce? And so in this example here, I've defined that as being a DUNS match. So in this case, a DUNS match is a match based off the D&B unique ID. So this is just a third-party data enrichment source that's providing a unique ID. So if we make a match where two accounts have that same unique ID, we have that high level of confidence. So in that scenario, we can go ahead and auto-merge it together. We feel comfortable doing that. But as we go down the different levels, we're becoming looser and looser in terms of what we consider a match. So till we get down to some level like down here, where we're just making a match based off domain and website. Well, if two accounts have just the same domain on them, so the same website, we may or may not have a duplicate. There's a lot of accounts that share the same domain, but they're separate legal entities. So that might be an example where we want to flag it as a potential duplicate, say, hey, we've identified it, but not actually go ahead and auto-merge records together until somebody actually goes in and takes a look at it. So what we'll do here is we'll look at a couple examples. So the first one I've got is going to be looking at a DUNS match. So if we have two accounts, we're going to match them together, and this is going to be based off of a DUNS match. So we'll take a look at our two accounts here. So we have corporation service company and corporation service company. And so what we'll notice is that they share the same D&B DUNS number. So if we look here in our D&B optimizer section, we have our DUNS number here. And then if we come over to this account here, we have our D&B optimizer DUNS number, which is equal on both of those accounts. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to manually rerun this account. But one important piece to note here is in this example, I'm going to be manually rerunning the accounts. So it's going to be kind of replicating that process of a new account getting created. So this account is already created inside of our CRM, but I'm going to be saying, hey, I want to rerun it through that assignment process to kind of emulate that process of it being a net new account being created. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to rerun this record. And so we'll go ahead and we will save this. And so now what's going to happen is it's going to look to match against all the other records we currently have inside of our Salesforce environment. And then it's going to determine, well, out of these two records, which one should be the winning record. And so in this example, our criteria for being the winning record is whichever record is the oldest. So this first record here was created before this record here. So what we should see is this record no longer exists inside of our Salesforce environment. So we can see here, this record has disappeared. And then if we come over to this record here, what we should be seeing is we're going to stamp some information on this record to say, hey, we've identified a duplicate in this scenario here. Since we have that high level of confidence, we've gone ahead and auto-merged it together. So again, in this scenario, this was our top tier match, which was based off that DUNS number. We've identified the date in which it took place, and we've gone ahead and we've auto-merged the two records together because, again, we have that higher level of confidence in this scenario. Our second example is going to then be looking at, okay, we're going to do the same process where we're going to rerun our record through the assignment flow. But rather than auto-merging these records together, we're going to flag them as being a potential duplicate. And that's because we don't have that same level of confidence. So in this case, we have Apex builders, and then we have our account for Apex. But the commonality that they share is just the domain. So again, this is an example where we may or may not have a duplicate, but we probably want to have someone going in to take a look at this match before we just merge them together. Because again, we can have two accounts that share the same domain, but they can be completely separate legal entities. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and rerun the same process. So I'll rerun this record here. And so the big difference we'll notice in this example is that neither of the records are going to be deleted. What we're going to do is we're going to populate those fields saying, hey, we've identified a match. And then after that, we're going to look at how we can actually go ahead and determine whether or not we want to resolve that match. So I will refresh this record here. And then what I will also do is I'll come over to our Apex account and I will also refresh this record. And what we should see is that both of the records still exist inside of our Salesforce environment. And so if we come down on this record, what we'll see is the same fields populated as we saw in the first example. So the date in which the duplicate was identified and also the type of match that we made. So in this case here, it was a domain and website match. And then we've also stamped the ID of the primary record. So again, neither of the records have been deleted. So now we need a way for us to be able to go back and actually decide whether or not we want to merge these two records together. And so what we can do is we can run a report to show us proactively what are all the duplicates that we've identified. And what this report will really do is it'll give us visibility into, one, the types of duplicates that we're actually generating, but two, also the sort of scale of duplicates. So for some of our customers, what they'll do is they'll use a report like this as a threshold to say, hey, maybe when it gets over 100 duplicates being identified, that might be a good indication that, hey, we actually need to go back and start resolving some of these duplicates because they're starting to pile up inside of our environment. And so if we come down to the bottom of the report here to today's date, what we'll see is those two accounts that we just ran on, Apex Builders and Apex, have been identified proactively as being potential duplicates inside of our system. And so this is where we can tie the proactive and reactive deduplication together, because what we've done here is we've flagged potential duplicates, but now what we can do is we can actually bring them to light within the complete clean tool and then decide whether or not we want to merge them together. So now if we come back to our complete clean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run another complete clean job on our account record. But in this case here, we're going to be looking at those proactive duplicates that we've identified through this report here. So in this example, again, what we're going to do is we're going to select our records. In this case here, I'm going to select all accounts we currently have inside of our Salesforce environment. And then what we're going to do is we're going to match those records together. And so what I'm going to do in this example is I'm going to use all that information that we've stamped on the records as my matching criteria to help me identify those duplicates we've identified in this report here, and again, bring them to light within the complete clean tool. So that's what I've done down here. I've also set my logic. Once we've done that, like we talked about previously, what we're going to do is, one, we are going to select our winning record. So in this case, whichever account has the largest closed $1 amount, that will be determined as our winner. If they're equal, well, then we'll default to the oldest account. And then again, down here, this is where we're going to have our custom field by field data retention, which we can customize and change depending on, again, the data points that are going to be most relevant to the team. And so once we've done that, what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to match these records together. And then what we'll see is a lot of the duplicates that we've proactively identified in this report here are now going to be brought to light within the complete clean tool. So we'll just give that a moment to load. But as we can see here, we can see all the duplicates that we've proactively identified, the type of match we've made. And then if we come to, I believe, our third page here, what we can see here is that match that we just made, so Apex Builders to Apex. And then again, we have the flexibility to, one, choose, do we actually want to merge these records together? If we say, hey, yep, I think these are duplicates, I want to merge them together, we can then decide, well, out of these two records, which one do I want to be the winning record? And then finally, we can also do our custom field by field data retention to decide on what are the different fields that we want to retain. So again, maybe I want this first one to be the winner, but rather than taking the Apex Builders title, I want to just take the account name of Apex. So again, our first account here is going to be the winner, but this is going to be the title that we actually choose to carry forward. And so that there is the two products tied together. Again, it's both of those approaches using both the proactive and reactive deduplication, tying those two things together to, again, kind of create that optimal space around duplicates inside of our environment, where one, we have interface to be able to clean them up en masse, but two, we're also proactively cleaning them up to make sure we don't end up in the same